I can promise you this, your life will never be the same when you really lean into how can I be a blessing to someone else and how can I receive the blessings that are coming to me? And when you live that way, there's no better way to live.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I have a quick question. How generous are you? Do you give as much of your time, your money, even your attention to others as you could be? Maybe. But today's guest, Cynthia Kersey, thinks you could probably do more, and you probably should do more because she understands the profound ways that being generous can help you. You see, she has studied generosity for more than 25 years, and she has proven that you being more generous is actually a ticket to a better life for you. How? Well, prepare yourself. Cynthia has been called one of the world's greatest motivators, and she is an expert on all the positive connections that generosity brings, and she's about to bring us one of the greatest gifts ever. Cynthia, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Oh my gosh, very well said. Thank you. It makes me, hey, generosity is the thing I'm most inspired about. So I'm so excited to talk about this. And thank you for generously inviting me to be a part of your show.
Well, thank you for generously showing up on our show. I really appreciate it. We're excited about this. So, and I actually understand that you and I, after all the stalking I've done that we talked about earlier, have something in common. We're both telemarketers back in the day.
My goodness. Jeez.
That's how I started my career. Yeah. I mean, could you maybe walk us through like the start at Sprint when you were telemarketing and then getting to the Unstoppable book? We're just going to reel it back just a minute.
Oh my God. That's such a long time ago. Well, yeah, I was in corporate America and, but even though I was good at it, I wasn't inspired by being a telemarketer, and selling long distance. And I'd always been inspired by unstoppable stories, people, that had to overcome all sorts of adversity to achieve a goal, a dream, a life that they loved. Yeah, I quit my job, cashed in my entire life savings, downsized our life at that point to write my first book, Unstoppable. That book has been out for 25 years now.
I know. And I was reading it and actually like studying it. I was wondering, how did you get those stories from those phenomenal 45 people? Did you actually, I mean, some of them were not alive, but did you actually interview them or did you just research them? And
all of it.
Did you get to know?
What's interesting? What's interesting too, Stacey, is that years ago when I did that book, I had to really work hard to find stories around women. So believe it or not, most of the stories are around men. So I had to really work hard to find them. And then of course, interview the ones that were still living. And today it's there's so many incredible stories about all sorts of people. So it's a lot easier now.
Because at that time, like you had just come out of just being working at Sprint. I mean, I know you were very successful there, but like you were in sales.
That's right.
Like that, I was thinking about that. Like that would be like me trying to go find 45 inspirational people that I admire and just did you call them up? Or were you?
All of it. And if you write about 45, imagine how many you actually reach out to, how much research. I hired a full-time researcher at that point. It was so fun because we were finding people. It's like, oh my God, you think this person's amazing. This person had no arms and no legs and they were like a pro football player. And like, it was crazy. There's the different types of people. The human spirit is so inspiring and people, when you get a purpose, and this is, one thing that I think is so important is finding something in your life that's bigger than you are. And, for me, when I wrote my book, I did the whole thing, cashing my entire life savings to write this book. 18 months after my book came out, I separated from my husband after 20 years. And it put me on a whole different trajectory. And I feel like it's so important to be able to find a purpose that's bigger than your pain because it's what gives our life meaning.
I saw that. I saw that you wrote that. And I mean, to me, I'm just wondering, like, you as the person at Sprint, then to go and suddenly interview all these people. Like, to me, you're an unstoppable person, but also like, how did you come that word unstoppable? Like, did you just suddenly wake up one night and you're like, you know what I want to do? Like, I'm really curious about that because I feel like I'm in that same sort of situation where I'm reaching for more right now. So, and I think so many people are, so I'd love your story.
I had like 18 pages of potential titles. And one person who came up with the worked with John Gray on Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. He's like, I hear you keep saying unstoppable and one other word. And then I thought, well, what would it be like to have an unstoppable employee? And I interviewed all these people just to get, input, and that was it. That was the
Wow.
word. And it's interesting, Stacey, that you say that because I also started writing another book that's now incorporated in my book, The Generosity Effect, about what's yours to do. And what I'm hearing from you is like in your life now, what is yours to do? Because so many people, it's so funny. People say, well, why are you helping people in Kenya and Africa when there's so many people in your backyard? And it's like, it's because it's mine to do.
Right.
I'm called to do this. And it sounds like maybe that's yours to do,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I did a show, and this one very famous person was interviewing me, and he's like, well, have you done anything with veterans? And I said, well, I haven't. I mean, I love them, but I don't have a lot of connection to them. I said, but it sounds like it's yours to do. Right. And he's kind of like making me wrong because I wasn't doing that. And I feel, and this is the key. We all have what is ours to do that's uniquely
Ah.
ours. And when we bring those gifts to the world, um, it blesses you and it blesses the people that you work with.
Ah, I just love that.
Is that what led to your year of giving? You went through a year of giving.
I did. So it was building up to that. So basically, so I was still running my unstoppable business, right?
Yeah.
I was an author and speaker and coaching people on being unstoppable. And my real heart was around generosity. I've always been inspired by giving. Millard Fuller was, the founder of Habitat for Humanity, was an amazing mentor to me. And so I wanted to do the foundation full time, but I'm like, how am I going to make money? I'm a single mom now, right? How am I going to earn an income? And the economy was terrible at that point. And so I read a book called 29 Gifts by Cammie Walker. And Cammie Walker, when she was, I don't think early 40s, she had just gotten married, just got back from her honeymoon, and she woke up one morning and her arm wouldn't move
Mm.
and in the hospital, and she's diagnosed as having multiple sclerosis, and it was a very fast onset. So for 2 years her life is just spiraling, and she's in pain and she's depressed. She can't work anymore. She's having a hard time walking, and she called a friend who's a spiritual teacher to her, and she was hoping for a pity party. And her name's Mabali, and Mabala, and she said, she calls Mabala. Mabala's like, stop, you got to stop thinking about your problem so much. You're making it worse. And she said, I want to recommend that you give away 29 gifts in 29 days.
Mm.
And Cammie's like, are you serious? What, you think just giving a gift's going to make me feel better? And she said, I do. And it doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be monetary. It could be a prayer. It could be a kind word. But the key thing is you do it from a place of abundance, right? And so Cammie thought, well, it's not going to hurt me. So every day she did something, and very quickly her life changed. By the end of those 29 days, she's walking again. She made new friends. She's working again. And she said it was like a miracle to her. And I thought about her story and I thought, I'm going to do a year of giving. I'm not going to do 29 days of giving. I'm fully leaning into this because I wanted to do the foundation full time, but I didn't have the faith to do it. Literally that year. And I had 4 steps to my year of giving. Number one, you start with gratitude. When you start with gratitude, what are you grateful for and why? You're already receiving the abundance, right? You're acknowledging the abundance that's already in your life. And if you ever have a problem with it, it's kind of crazy when I think about it. But, sometimes, I'm writing my list and I can't come up with 10 things. And I'd start with the basics. I'm grateful that I have clean water that comes out of our faucet. I'm grateful every time I go to Whole Foods and we just have an abundance of food. The beauty. I mean, there's so many things to be grateful for. So then the second thing is to be generous with myself. Fill my cup first. So I always had books on my shelf, and like Michael Singer's book Untethered Soul or my spiritual practice, I would read something. The third step is be generous with others. And this is like looking for how can I enrich another person's life. And again, it's not about money. I mean, it can be, money's a part of it. And so, like, for example, I was in Marina Del Rey, this is where I lived, and I was having lunch, and this woman, I met her, and she was going to school to be a nurse. She was a waitress and going to school to be a nurse. And I was so inspired by her. I gave her a tip that was bigger than my bill. And it felt so great. You both know this. And then she sees me when we're walking out. She gives me this big, huge hug. And it was just like, I mean, I can almost cry thinking about it. It's like, thank you for letting me be a part of your journey. You're blessing me, right? By being able to bless you. And then the fourth piece, which is as important, is generously receive. And how often, when we get a compliment, do we dismiss it? Oh, no, it was nothing. We push away the blessings. I feel like when that people, love is God in action. And when people are supporting us, it's part of the circle. And if we stop the circle, we're stopping the good that comes to us. So those 4 steps is what I did every single day for 1 year. It changed my life. And there's 3 key takeaways. Number one, generosity creates heaven on earth. So when you're consistently generous habitually every day, guess what? You feel better, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I feel so blessed. It's like you're looking for the good, you're seeing how you can be a blessing, you're engaged with strangers, like so it was like I experienced heaven on earth. Number two is generosity generated the faith that I needed to get out of my comfort zone, leave a successful business to start my foundation. And what happened was I was talking to my dear friend Mary Morrissey. I'm like, I think it's time. And she said, I want to help you. And she got other friends together. They supported me for a year so I could start my foundation. Again, if I hadn't been willing to receive that, a 500,000 people would not be impacted
Wow.
by our work with the Unstoppable Foundation. And the third thing that was fantastic was I was speaking at an event in LA about giving, and there was this man who was at the speaker table, and I at the end I went back and we were talking. He's like, I've never heard anybody talk about generosity that way. You really inspired me, and I gave a contribution to your foundation. I'm thinking, I like this guy. Bottom line, I ended up marrying him.
Oh,
Oh my
you
God.
So
really like
I
this
had
guy.
been single. I had deeply, like my deepest heartfelt desire was to have a partner that I was in alignment with, that we had the same values. So that year, I started my foundation. I met the love of my life, and I experienced heaven on earth.
Wow.
So come on,
Wow.
it's like,
Wow.
That's a wild
and
Yeah.
ride.
I always say, I can't guarantee the results you're going to have. They may not be like mine or like Cami, but I can promise you this: your life will never be the same when you really lean into how can I be a blessing to someone else, and how can I receive the blessings that are coming to me? And when you live that way, there's no better way to live.
I do think like it's one thing that people don't know who aren't involved in philanthropy that often is that there's the secret is you feel so good. I was working on a number of boards and with nonprofits, and like you almost feel like this is really, am I just doing this
For
basically
me.
for me?
Right,
Like you almost
right.
feel like it's that sort of like a rebound effect. Like I know I'm helping others and
Yeah.
giving of myself and maybe financially, but it really feels good.
Yeah.
It does, and it's okay to acknowledge that,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
not like we're bad. It's like,
No.
yeah, it feels fantastic. And when we understand generosity is the most self-centered thing we can do, the self-supporting thing we can do, we're not doing it. It's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not giving to you so you give to me. I'm giving out of the abundance. I'm giving out of the blessings. And when we give from that place and we're not attached
Mm-mm.
to
Mm-hmm.
it coming back from that person, we're just giving because we feel called to do it. It's ours to do. It's like it makes complete sense. And that's how the world, as a matter of fact, I'm going to share a concept.
Yeah.
It's called moral elevation. So not only do we sometimes feel high, helpers high from giving, but just experiencing another person being generous makes us feel inspired. And it's this term called moral elevation. And you may have remembered years ago when the guy in Paris, there was a baby dangling from a an apartment building. And this guy who was he saw what was happening and he scaled the building like Spider-Man. And in a minute,
Yeah.
he climbed up and got that baby down. And people were inspired. They put videos on, the social media, and he even became a citizen in France. But the point is that people were so inspired by that. And you don't have to be super or Spider-Man to evoke moral elevation. You can give up your seat on a bus. You can be kind to another person. And when someone witnesses it, it makes them feel better. And I feel like at this time of our lives, when there's so much polarity and so much divisiveness, when you see this person, when you're generous, it breaks down bridges.
It's
And you
contagious.
actually
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
each other as beautiful human beings. And I feel like it's a really important way to build a bridge.
Everybody has their quotes, right, that they kind of live by. And one I heard in my early 20s that I've never forgotten, and it has impacted me ever since. It was give of your substance and not of your surplus. And it was so simply stated and wonderfully stated. And it has helped guide me in situations. I'm going to give of my substance. I don't want to, or it hurts, so I'm the guy that says yes a lot, right?
Wait, so give up. Say that.
Give of your substance, not of your surplus. So if somebody asks you for $1 and you have 7,000, yeah, it's easy. But if they say, "Can you give me money?" You give them 3,500. That's your
Wow.
substance you're
Wow.
tapping into. I'm curious, as an expert on generosity and the positives that it creates. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Well, I would love to hear if that's a practice for you. How has that impacted your life?
How has it impacted my? I don't look at it that way, to be honest with you. I don't.
Well, think about it.
I mean,
if
but
you're
it's
giving
small
from,
things. It's
yeah,
little things.
yeah,
To your point, you tip somebody really well,
hmm
or if you're going to give money to someone who is homeless or experiencing homelessness, you reach in your pocket, whatever you find, you give them the biggest bill. Like that's giving of my sub. Like that's how I am interpreting it, right? I We can cut this later, but I started with Plan USA Child Reach. If you're familiar with them, they have
of course I
yeah.
am.
I mean, I
Absolutely.
imagine you would be, right? But I started with them sponsoring children in like 24 years old, and I've never stopped. But at 24
That's
years
great.
old, that monthly deduction was my substance. It was a lot, right? But then that is the quote that popped into my head, and I'm like, damn it, I have to do this. Sort of like you said. All of a sudden, it's like, oh no, I have to do this. But
Yeah,
it doesn't. I don't feel enriched. I feel like it's a duty, right?
that's very
It's a human
fascinating.
duty.
I mean, that's really, I get it. I totally understand the responsibility. I also understand, and I would just invite you to kind of think about it because it's like that we feel so great when we do it. So yes, I hear and I think it is a duty. Absolutely. It's like, him who's given a lot, much is
Right.
given, much is required.
Right.
Let me share a story, though. I'm going to share a story that I just love that I think really reflects the generosity effect. And it's a story about a woman named Hilda. And Hilda, when she was a young girl, her family was able to escape Nazi Germany because a stranger provided them with the money they needed to leave.
Wow.
So she never forgot about how much that gift meant to her, and she was looking for a way to be able to give back. And she heard about for a small monthly contribution, just like you do with Plan, right? She was able to sponsor a young Kenyan boy to go to school. So Chris Mburu was that little boy. He was, raised in a mud hut. His family were struggling to live on $1 a day. And he knew that to his mom said, to have a better life, you've got to have an education. And he studied so hard, but no matter how hard he studied, money was the only thing that was going to keep him in school for his school fees. And he's in and out of school. And he Hildeback found out about him, started to pay his school fees, and he thought, Hilda was thinking like this is a drop in a bucket, right? Like she didn't understand, kind of like what you're saying right now in a way, right? It's like, oh, it's a duty, she wanted to
Right.
do it. She didn't realize that completely changed his life. And he ended up not only being able to finish high school, he went to college. He was ultimately able to get the resources to go to Harvard Law School. He's now a lawyer, a human rights advocate. He's working with children around the world who have no voice. And he was so inspired by Hilda that he started a scholarship fund in her name
Wow.
to help other kids in his village. Get this, 1,000 kids now have an opportunity to go to school because of Chris Mabur's inspiration from Hilda. And what he did was he decided, I've got to meet this woman. And he was like, trying to find her. And he finally found her. She was living in Sweden, and she wasn't the woman he thought. Like, she lived in a simple apartment, a 1-bedroom apartment. She'd been a teacher. He was envisioning this, really
Right.
wealthy person.
Sure.
And again, she's like, oh no, it's like, I'm honored, it's like, and he said, you don't understand, you're my hero. And I think we can't solve the whole world's problems, but we can solve those who are in front of us. And I acknowledge you, Mark, for continuing to support children through plan. It's like, and I know firsthand through the Unstoppable Foundation, it's like the power of an education, the power of having your basic needs met is life changing. So
It's a domino
just, I
effect.
think
Yeah.
it's just great that you do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think would be a way for someone who hasn't necessarily been overly generous in the past, or who maybe is like, well, I only have enough money for myself. Like, how can I suddenly become a generous
Yeah.
person? Because I do want to give back somehow. What do you think are some ways, like 2 or 3 ways that someone could change that mindset?
Yeah. So great question. So number one is what you just mentioned is a scarcity mindset. So if they're not generous, like, what if there's so many benefits to generosity, and there is, like, it's like, a key to greater mental health, greater physical, like even longevity. It's like, it's proven. There is science around this. And yet people are still stuck, many people, because they feel like there's not enough. And the truth is, generosity generates more than enough. So I would recommend that you try it. And again, it's not about money. It's like, how can you, bless another person? I'll give an example. I was speaking at an event, and typically when I'm traveling, sometimes I'm actually an introvert. And so I kind of like being more quiet. And I got in the Uber and I'm like, I want to enrich this man's life. So I started engaging with him. I asked him, what is he most passionate about? And he said, I'm a street performer. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I do Frank Sinatra, Johnny Cash, like all these people. And I said, really? Would you be willing to perform for me, sing a song? And he did, and he gave me a choice. And I said, Ring of Fire. And I said, can I record it? And he said, yes. He starts singing Ring of Fire. And I'm giggling like a little girl. Like, I'm just so tickled by his demeanor, and afterwards I'm acknowledging him, and he had this big huge smile. And what was funny is I'm still talking about that. I raised money that night for my foundation, but the thing that really touched me was that human interaction, because I was like, I felt his joy from being acknowledged for his talent, and he blessed me. So it's like, how can you be a blessing? Maybe it's just listening to someone, asking how they're doing, and shutting your mouth and listening, from a place of curiosity. I mean, being a great listener is one of the best gifts you can give anybody. So for me, every day as I look at how can I be a blessing to someone else. So maybe it's reaching out to somebody. Maybe it's like Cammie Walker, right? She started when she was giving. The first day she reached out to another friend who had multiple sclerosis, and her husband was traveling. So it's like, what can we do? What is in our field? Like, what, comes in to our lives? And I can promise you, when you start it, it is habit forming. Hopefully, it's habit forming. Mark, look, you've been doing it for 24 years. There's a reason you're doing it.
It's mine. How did you phrase that? It's yours.
Mine to do.
It's mine to
It's
do.
yours to do.
Right. Right.
That's right. And if you're not doing it, you're circuiting the universe, right? That's yours to do.
Right.
Just like what I'm doing is mine to do. And if I'm not doing it, there's a gap. So I just acknowledge both of you for being willing to do what's yours to do because you're doing things I can't reach the children and the people like you are.
I'm jealous that you were close with Bob Proctor. I love watching videos of that man.
Yeah.
Just his
He was a
mindset.
dear
Yeah,
friend.
that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
He was one of my biggest supporters. So basically, when I started, my very first philanthropic project happened when my book, came out, and I was 18 months after my book came out, and my 20-year marriage ended. I talked to Millard Fuller, the founder of Habitat for Humanity, and he said, when you have a great pain in your life, you need a greater purpose. And he had just gotten back from Nepal and recommended that I build a house for a family in need. And I thought, how many houses would I need to build to offset this pain in my life? And I'd never built one house, and it was $2,000 a house for a family in Nepal. And I thought, I don't know, five? No. 10? No. It wasn't until I got to 100 houses
Wow.
that was bigger than my pain. And I thought I had no idea how to raise the money. I had no idea how to do it. But Bob Proctor was a new friend of mine, and I talked to him, and he's like, I said, how am I going to raise this money? He said, oh, Cynthia, it's simple. You just find 10 people to contribute $20,000 each. And
It's
I'm
all
thinking,
math.
that doesn't sound simple to me. I don't
It's
I don't
very
know
simple.
anybody's got 20,000. So what did I do? I'm looking at him. He's in front of me. And I took every ounce of courage and I said, would you be the first to contribute $20,000? And he told me later, he almost like passed out because but
I
what's he
love it.
going to say?
Right.
And he said, yes, I'll be the first. And he said that changed his life because it would put him on a trajectory of giving that he had never been on before. And he actually became our biggest supporter. They contributed $500,000 a year to support the foundation.
Wow.
And so Bob was a very, very dear friend and mentor and my biggest advocate for this work.
Wow.
So, yeah.
You had met so many people like that. Like how did you meet, the head of Habitat for Humanity and
Yeah.
Bob Proctor and, Jack Canfield? I saw you were
Yeah.
working with him and Oprah, and like, how did you just pick up the phone and call them? Was there some sort of a way that
You are a telemarketer, so you must be very good at
yes,
that.
yes,
Yeah,
we are
right.
good. We are good at that. Yeah.
So I met Millard. I wanted to interview him for my book. So that's how I met him. I met Bob through a mutual friend when my book first came out. His name was Roger Boger, and he did a call with us. He's like, Bob, you need to read this book. So he introduced. I'm, being in the industry, right? I'm in the personal development industry. So you go to events, I met people. I met Jack at the big Jack and Mark Victor Hansen at the Book Marketing Expo. You just meet people.
Yeah.
And the thing isn't, I feel like one of the reasons I've been able to attract really great mentors is because I'm not a know-it-all. I'm willing to listen to their advice. I'm very grateful. I look at how can I be a blessing for them? And because it's a beautiful relationship. As a mentor, one of the greatest thing we can do is help other people. We feel so proud of them. I think about thousands of students that we've now impacted in Kenya, and it makes my heart so happy, to see how well they're doing. And Mark, you probably feel the same way with, when you're supporting a scholarship or whatever, it's like, thank you, God, for the opportunity to serve and to see how their life is enriched as a result.
Yeah.
It's
So,
another form of generosity. But I'm curious too, because everyone who's listening sees this and you're such a phenomenal human being. But I'm wondering, you must have your days when you're, like you have a cold today, or like when you're just feeling like down. I have a feeling you're going to say your answer to get out of that hole is generosity, right? Or is finding your purpose. And
yeah,
yeah.
1,000%. But the type of giving that's really generative is that inspired giving, right? And that's what can change our life. So, and we all have things where you're giving to your family, maybe, there's sometimes that we're giving out of, call it obligation.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But but I'm saying the type that's generative and changes our life is the part that comes from inspiration.
Love that. That
What,
is the
what about the
key.
people who say, I just don't have it in me? I don't have it. I don't have it to give. I don't have the time. I'm
Yeah.
booked out. I don't have the extra money.
Yeah.
I can't even give people my attention. I wake up, I'm exhausted, and then I go to bed.
Yeah. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
So they're operating with a misinterpretation of what's true. And the truth is their belief system, right? It's a scarcity mentality. It's like, oh, I don't have enough. They don't understand the spiritual law and the science of generosity. And generosity generates more. And it is, again, there, it sounds to me like, oh my God, I don't have enough time. I'm this, I'm that. It sounds to me like they're overwhelmed, right? With a whole bunch of things maybe they're not even inspired by. So I would just say start easy. It could be a blessing, it could be a prayer, it could be a phone call. It doesn't have to be a lot, but I can promise you, just like how Cammie Walker's life changed, she, literally from being depressed, ready to kill herself. And just by the act of giving in 29 days, her life changed. So I would just say stay open. And to say you don't have it in you is so sad
Hmm.
because, wow, they're missing when I was calling you a light. We all have it within ourselves. What is generosity? Generosity is loving kindness. That's what it is. And if we don't have loving kindness in our hearts, that's not a very fulfilling life to live.
That's
So it
beautiful.
is there. How do you
It's
tap
intriguing.
into it? You tap into it by sharing it with somebody else.
Yeah.
So, Cynthia, what is next for you and how can we help you get there?
Well, thank you. That's a very generous question.
I try.
Well, so a couple of things. First off, I've got my new book, A Generosity Effect. It's going to be coming out the fourth quarter. So I love that. And then, what we're doing with the foundation. So, just like with Plan, Mark, you're mentioning, we work with entire communities. We bring an entire 5 pillar model that goes in and partners with communities. It is not a handout. It's a partnership where we're bringing education, access to clean water, healthcare, nutritious food, training for the parents to generate an income. So if people want to be a part of that, if they want to financially support, they could just go to unstoppablefoundation.org and learn more about what we're doing. And I have to say, I feel like I'm on a mission of really helping people understand how generosity can change their life, their business, and the world.
Such great advice. That was awesome.
Yeah.
We could
Thank
probably go
you.
on for another
Thank you.
hour.
I know. I know.
For
Wow.
sure, we
I feel
could.
so
Yes,
blessed to have
absolutely.
this time with you. Like it was really wonderful. I feel enlightened and happier.
She's going to be
This is
more
what you
generous
do
to
for
me
people,
now.
right?
Hey, it applies to everything,
Yeah.
even husbands,
Yeah.
relationships. I mean, honestly, even with my husband, we're like, oh, well, that wasn't very generous. I'm thinking, I'm not being very generous to him right now. It like informs everything.
Wow.
And when you write a book about the generosity effect, I am aware of how I'm not generous, right? Like I notice, wow, that's not being generous. And I feel like the awareness and how do we bring more generosity to our relationships can absolutely change them. I mean, the Gottmans talk about this. It's like one of the number one keys to a happy, healthy marriage is generosity, loving
Yeah.
kindness. You guys are such a joy. You're both beautiful lights. I absolutely see that in both of you. And just keep doing, bringing your gifts to the world, blessing those who don't get it. God, I mean, I wouldn't want to be them. So
That's
thank you for
wonderful.
everything you do and for bringing me on to share this. I really appreciate you both.
Thank you,
Got it.
Cynthia.
Thank you again. And thank you guys for watching. We will
Thank
see you
you.
again in the next episode.